Hello viewers, my name is John Croft and I'm speaking to you from Perth, Western Australia, the most isolated city on the planet, at a time of isolation. If anyone had ever thought that the world cannot change, the last 2 months is proof positive that their idea was wrong. In the last 2 months, the world has changed beyond all recognition as the result of a global pandemic, the biggest pandemic in the last century. The only time that we've experienced anything similar to this was in 1918, at the time of the Spanish flu pandemic, in which 50 million people around the world died. And so here we are in a global pandemic, a time when people, even in the most isolated city on the planet, are self-isolating. And so this time gives us a lesson. It gives us a lesson that possibilities for change are really possible, and change with a speed and an intensity and a direction that no one would have thought possible before. In the United States at the moment, for instance, we see black people are reclaiming the streets with the hope that the racism that has been a characteristic of the United States since its foundation and the 4 centuries of slavery that followed the settlement of the United States can at last be overcome. That the endemic polarization between haves and have-nots on the basis of race or color or religion or creed can at last be overcome. But it's also an opportunity for bad things to happen too. The isolation that we're facing, the pandemic, the collapse of the economies worldwide, are also opportunities for psychopaths or autocrats to try to take control. And we're seeing this happen in places like Turkey or in Poland, even in the United States and Australia, or in Brazil, where autocrats or people who seek to increase their power are using this opportunity to take control in ways that we wouldn't have anticipated before. And so, we're looking in this talk in new possibilities for the future. And what we need to start with is a recognition. And it's a recognition that all of us together are on a bridge. We're on a bridge from where we've come from and to where we're going. And our knowledge of both places is not perfect. But how do we find where we've come from? For that, we need a description of the past, and a description of the past that makes sense. How do we know where we're going? For this, we need a prescription for the future, because the future is made. It is actually made by our action and our inaction. It's made by what we do and what we don't do. And we are not passive recipients of the future, but we are creators of the story that we're building. So, we are trying to shift from a description to a prescription. Now, at the moment, we don't just have a planetary pandemic. With the new technology, we have an infodemic at the same time. There are all kinds of stories spreading, superstitions, opinions, stories, fears that are all being peddled at the moment in a way that we need to take care of. And what we need to do is recognize there are 5 different explanations about what's happening. The first explanation is what the people think is happening. This is what, if you were to go out into the streets and ask people in the street what's happening, they would tell you. That's the first description of what is happening. The second description of what's happening is the thousands of conspiracy theories that are flying around at the moment. And these conspiracy theories are built out of fear. These conspiracy theories are built because people see dots of information and they connect it into a confirmation bias about patterns that they believe are true, that are not necessarily true, but the pattern is what they see, and they select the evidence to fit into that pattern. The third description of what is happening is what serious scholars and scientists think is happening. And this is a third explanation that may not bear much similarity to the first two. The fourth description of what is happening is in fact the description of what the decision makers and politicians and event makers think is happening. And that can be very different from the first four. The final description of what's happening is what really happens. And this, we have to accept that it is not any more complex than we know. It's possibly more complex than we can conceivably know. And so we need to have a different way of dealing with that fifth description of what's happening in the world at the moment. The prescription for the future at the moment is also an interesting thing, because the way in which the work that reconnects, the work that Dragon Dreaming has been built out of, is built out of work of connection. And in fact, it's disconnection which is the source of all our problems at the moment. It's disconnection with the deep ecology, the viral ecology that we're getting a crash course in with the pandemic of the coronavirus at the moment. But there's other lessons that we need to learn too. One of the lessons that we find is that the countries that are having the best results to the crisis at the moment, for example, at the moment, in the last 7 days, there hasn't been in Australia a single person who's died from coronavirus. Tonight I heard that at the moment there's 1,200 people a day dying from coronavirus in Brazil, for instance. And what we find is that it's taking a different kind of leadership. We have been misled about the concept of leadership for a long time. What happens is, in times of crisis, people often look to leaders to lead them out of their difficulties. They look to leaders that are autocrats or are dominant in telling people what to do. But that's not the sort of leadership that the coronavirus is showing we need. There's a second kind of leadership that is really important. And it's a leadership that deals with information. It's information we're urgently needing at the moment more than anything else. And so you, as an activist, if you can really specialize in providing people with accurate, high-quality information, that's going to help build the kind of leadership that we need. But there's something else that's needed too, this new possibility for the future. Evidence around the world is showing right now that the leaders that are doing best in the coronavirus seem to be women. And there's a strange reason for this, because the leadership that we're urgently needing now is a leadership that's built out of empathy. It's an empathy for the people who are suffering. It's an empathy for the people who don't know what to do. It's empathy for people who are caught facing possibilities of unemployment or facing possibilities of isolation at the moment. That's what we're needing at the moment. And that's the kind of leadership that women leaders seem to be capable of giving at this moment more than male autocrats. But it's not just empathy that's needed. There's a third kind of leadership that's urgently needed too, and this is the leadership of providing people with meaning. And the meaning that we need at the moment is a meaning of reconnection. It's a reconnection with ourselves. It's a reconnection at this time of isolation from communities, of community connection. And it's a meaning that is a meaning too of deep connection with the world in which we live. It's no accident that those three different kinds of meaning are the three principal objectives of the project management tools that we call Dragon Dreaming. That every project in Dragon Dreaming is a project of personal growth, it's a project of building community, and it's a project in service to the well-being and flourishing of life itself. We are needing these three right now. And the reason why is because faced with the changes that we are facing now, is that we see that there are in fact three different groups of people who are trying to cope. The first group of people are people who have long considered themselves to be activists. There are three different kinds of activists, as we know from the work that reconnects. There's the activists of the hand. These are activists who are engaging in holding actions in defense of the earth. These are the people who are blockading and trying to prevent the logging of rainforests. These are people who are trying to preserve the wisdom of indigenous peoples and prevent the building of pipelines or prevent the exploitation of climate change causing fossil fuels. This kind of holding action in defense of the earth is necessary at this stage, extremely necessary, because it saves lives. And it saves lives, not just human lives, but the lives of the ecosystems that we're a part of, that we're going to need for the future. Because we don't know what's coming, and we need to try to preserve as many lives as we can. Because this is important. When lives are lost, that's when suffering results. And it's not just human suffering. For instance, the COVID-19 coronavirus seems to have spread from bats through perhaps pangolins to humans because the connections with living ecosystems broke down. And we need to maintain those connections for ourselves. So that's the holding actions in defense of the earth. But there's a second kind of activism that's necessary too. Holding actions in defense of the earth can be very much considered to be like a military campaign. And for those who've had to suffer through military campaigns, they know that a military campaign is about 90% boredom and 10% sheer terror. Putting yourself between a tree and a bulldozer is a difficult task. And very often people can only sustain that kind of holding action for short periods of time. For their own sake, for their own health, and it's very easy to suffer from burnout as a result of these. And so people fall away to the wayside, and then they feel guilty because they're not maintaining the work that needs to be done to keep the world alive and to keep the community alive. The second kind of activism, though, is equally important. This kind of activism, too, at a time like this, is necessary, but by itself it is not sufficient. It's necessary because the second kind of activism is the building of institutions that will support us when the other normal institutions of so-called normality fall by the wayside. It's the way in which elderly pensioners who are incapable or frail and aged can still get their needs met for food and company, or their health needs met, or their protection needs met. It's ways in which small children can still get educated when they're forced to stay at home. It's the things that are going to keep people fed, clothed and housed when unemployment increases. It's building these new institutions that are necessary for the survival in the future when the normal systems collapse. It's important that this work gets done, but this work too has limitations, and the limitation here is that this work can be co-opted or taken control of by others, and it can disempower us in the process. So we need to make sure that it's built from the highest democratic principles. But these first two kinds of work are not enough. We need a third kind of activism too. And this third kind of activism I've hinted at already. This third kind of activism is rebuilding the connections to enable us all to see the world with new eyes. To see that we are not separate from the world or separate from each other. We are a part of a living system that is immensely old and much wiser than we give it credence. So this is the work, the three kinds of work of normal activism. And faced with the changes that we're seeing at the moment, there's a lot of people in this kind of movement that know what's needed in the world in order to build sustainable cultures and build a healthy future for us all. These kinds of people need to work to make sure that their kind of future that we're building is actually in accordance with these kinds of principles. But there's a second group of people that is really important that we need to reach out to. And the second group of people are people who are aware that the previous system that we called normal has collapsed and is not there anymore. That what we called normal wasn't really normal. That what we called normal is in fact something that is supremely unnormal. Any world that is into building climate catastrophe and chaos, in which we've got a planet at the moment in which in the next 10 years 67% of the biodiversity of the world that was there in 1970 will have disappeared. That's not normal. We've got a world in which there are 14,000 nuclear bombs on the planet right now. And we have countries that are wanting to try and acquire these weapons in which just one bomb will destroy a city. This is not normal. This is a form of insanity. And we need to find ways of healing that insanity. Now, the second group I'm speaking about, they are aware that this normality is not working. They're aware that this normality is not the normality that we need to return to. In fact, we need to build a new world, but they may not know exactly what kind of world we need to build. But then there's a large group of a third kind of person who's reacting to the crisis we're in right now. These are people who are aware that what they thought was normal has collapsed. And so they feel afraid. They feel afraid of what's coming. They feel afraid of their vulnerability. They feel afraid of the way in which other people are reacting. They feel afraid of a virus that they don't understand. And their fear is being fueled by the infodemic that is occurring at the same time as the pandemic. This infodemic of misleading or superstitious information that's flying around that isn't based on science or based on understanding. And so we need to be able to reach out to this third group of people as well, to bring them with us. Because it's clear that this change that we are facing at the moment, this change is what we have in Dragon Dreaming been calling for a long time, the Great Turning. And this Great Turning is at last upon us. It's a turning that how do we build a new culture on the planet? A culture that is sustainable for not just human beings, but for life itself. This is a new project. It's a project unlike any we've ever had before. And this project that we've got, it's a project that cannot take thousands of years like the first great turning when we shifted from being hunters and gatherers to being farmers and living in cities took. It's a project that won't take the hundreds of years of the scientific and technological revolution. This is a project that Greta Thunberg in Sweden has so accurately pointed to, is a project that will have to be achieved within the next decade. It has to be achieved within a period of only 10 years. And this kind of project too is a project that is going to take all of us, all three of the groups that I've just talked about. Those who know, the activists who know what needs to come. Those who know that the old systems are not working, but are not certain on how to get to the new world. And those that are fearful of the collapse of the old. We need to bring them all with us. No one can get left behind. And this is the reason why communication is so important at the moment. Communication literally means the process for building community. And we need to understand what true community is really all about. True communities are characterized by the quality of communication that links the people together. It's the way we speak to each other with respect and understanding that will lead us to building the kind of communication and the kind of communities we need. And with that respect and communication, we need to recognize that none of us is perfect. We all have faults. And we all too can never be aware of all of our faults. Awareness is important in building an understanding, not just of ourselves, not just of the others, not just of the organizations and societies we belong to, not just of the community, not just of the world. It's all of these all together, and it's built through dialogue. It's built through dialogue because dialogue is speaking together as equals. No one is superior. No one has the answers necessarily for the other. But through dialogue, we can explore together. And through exploring together, we can gain the tools and understandings that we need, not just to be able to shift information into understanding by testing it in the real world, not just to shift understanding into knowledge by putting it into practice through the projects that we do, but also we need to shift knowledge into wisdom through the process of deep reflection of what is the consequences and what are the ways to apply those new skills that we're learning at this time. Wisdom is what is needed in the world at the moment. And wisdom comes through that kind of binocular vision I spoke about at the beginning of this talk. It's the binocular vision to be able to see the description of where we've come from and at the same time provide a good prescription for the future. As we move from the description to the prescription, so we move from through using our values, through using the highest ethics that we're capable of adopting. And using those values and ethics, we build a vision that can be shared. A vision for the future that can determine the mission that we have at this time. And with the vision and the mission, that is the way of building the dream of the projects that we need to do, the intentions that we can share and bring groups of people around us to walk the path of the adventure into this new world that we're taking right now. So, this is the way in which we're going. We are not the victims of the story. The old stories are no longer holding the meaning that they once held. We need to build a new story. In fact, we are the storytellers. And as the storytellers of this new story, it's not just going to take all of us, this transition that I'm talking about. It's going to take all of the skills and capacities and wisdoms that we are capable of. It's going to take all of these things the skills that we don't even know we don't know. But we need to develop them if we're going to make a successful transition to a future that works for all humans, all of life. And paradoxically, there's something else that's happening too. This is a transition that's going to take every culture on the world. Not just the current cultures, but the cultures of the past too. We need to harvest them for the wisdoms that they've contained. You know, for 2,000 years, there was a woman who was considered to be the wife of the serpent, Python. And for 2,000 years, people came to consult her about the nature of the future. We've called her the Oracle of Delphi. But we don't know the name of this woman, not one of them, because when the women became the oracle, they surrendered their identity into the service of something larger than themselves. At first, the something larger than themselves was Gaia, the planet as a whole. But later on in classical Greece, it was the god Apollo. And this oracle, she had to fill herself with the spirit of this god. This is where the word enthusiasm comes from. It means to fill yourself with the spirit of Theos, the god. And when people approached the Oracle of Delphi after a long journey to get from their home to Delphi, as they walked up the hill towards the temple where the oracle resided, over the top of the temple were written 3 expressions. The first expression was know yourself. The second expression was everything in moderation. And the third expression was surety brings ruin. And if we can live with these 3 expressions to mind, then we will find that we can build new possibilities for the future that not only carry us, but carry the others that we are wanting to bring with us. The others that have been so kind to put up live chats at the moment in this YouTube video that I'm involved in. So, dear people, possibilities for the future. It is in your hands right now. But you are not alone. We need to build connection through communication with others, with all others that we can. And then we need to bring people who are capable of seeing the new futures that we want, seeing those who can build the awareness of our interconnectedness, ways of being together, ways of building connection with ourselves, connection with our communities, connection even with the inanimate objects of the world in which we live. This is the way to do it. Linking the spirit that animates us, with the mind that gives us access to thought, through our bodies that take action, and then in the emotional life that we live. Because all of the emotions are there because they give us access to information that we cannot get in any other way. It took us 150 million years to evolve the capacities for these feelings, and we need them now. So, it's activists of the head, the heart, and the hand. The mind, the body, and the emotions, coming from the spirit of who we are as human beings. Very often, I say that we are not human beings. We haven't yet achieved our full humanity yet. We are not human beings. We are human becomings. Because we're in the process of achieving our humanity. We're achieving who we're capable of truly being. And that will take all of us, all of us, all of us. It'll take every person, it'll take every skill, and it'll take every culture, all at the same time. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the most exciting time in human history. Wow, we are given such an opportunity right now. We're given such an opportunity that we are the people that we have been waiting for. It's nowhere else. It's no one else. It is us. And never doubt, as Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of committed and dedicated people cannot change the world. As she said, indeed it is the only thing that ever has. So, what are you waiting for? We have an amazing opportunity right now to reach out in kindness and generosity to others who are less fortunate than ourselves. Take that opportunity, and we can build the kind of world that will help us all. The kind of world that our children and our children's children can celebrate. Thank you. There are a number of comments and people who have been writing in that I'd like to draw attention to just briefly. What we see is that there is a necessity for these people to make a difference. There is a fourth kind of activism that I haven't spoken about. And this fourth kind of activism are the people who work to empower the activism of the other three. This is one that is out there to try to build the empowerment, not just of themselves, but of the others around them in their everyday lives. It's people who, in shopping centres, will help parents with small children through little acts of kindness, through little acts of generosity. And the more we can encourage these acts of kindness and generosity, the better will be the future for us all. But the other one too is that we need to put ourselves out into the realm of service, of deep service for others. And this deep service for others is ultimately deep service for ourselves, because we build ourselves through the service that we give others. Someone has just asked about the surety that brings ruin. The third statement on the Oracle of Delphi. There's a dispute about this one at Delphi because Delphi was built on the intersection of two fault lines. And these two fault lines crossed exactly under the temple. And the temple was built on limestone that had a very high bitumen content, and so it produced ethylene, which was a gas that the oracle would breathe as she sat in the Adityon, which was a cave right at the foundation of the temple. The way in which surety can bring ruin. We seek control. And seeking control means that we think we know everything that is needed. We think that we know what the future needs. There's one of the guiding principles of dragon dreaming is that we need to get our projects safely out of control. It was Benjamin Franklin, I believe, that said of our need for protection, our need for security, is built around out of our fear. And if we try to build protection and security above all the other needs, then not only will we lose our freedom, but we'll lose the protection and security that we're seeking too. The future is like a wave, and we need to learn how to surf that wave, to respond fast through feedback to the sorts of changes as they happen and as they come. This is the reason why security can bring ruin. This is the reason why we need to have the flexibility to be able to be open to new possibilities all the time. Because that's one thing that we can be certain of. The future will happen in ways that we cannot predict. And not only is it not knowable, not only is it unknown, not only is it incredibly complex, it is also very deeply chaotic. And understanding how to ride this chaos is to be able to respond rapidly to the unfolding nature of the chaos as it happens. One of the things about this chaos of the future is its wonder. If we were capable of controlling the future and making the future safe and easy, if that was the real nature of our future, then what would we do? We'd stop, take a holiday, let someone else do the work. But if we also knew that the future was hopeless and the future was a disaster, what would we do? Again, we'd stop and try to build a little nest around ourselves to save ourselves in the type of disaster that would be coming. You see, we don't know which way the future's going to go. And that is the best thing of all for activists. It's our lack of really understanding that inspires us to be more than who we're capable of being. It inspires us to take the step, to hear the call to adventure, to set forth on the quest, to build our allies, to turn and face the struggle, to look at what aspects of ourselves are blocking the future that we desire that can be sacrificed, and to step forth as magicians of the future, to be able to rebuild the kind of future that works for everybody. That is our task. And for that, we cannot have complete surety. In this, we need to be able to, as Joanna Macy says, realize that what we see as apathy in the community is not really apathy. What we see as apathy is really unresolved grief. It's unresolved grief because people are aware of what we're doing to the world. It's not information that they lack. We have all the information that we need. What it is that we lack an understanding of how to deal with the grief and sorrow of what we're losing. We're lacking the skills to be able to feel the fear and with courage do it anyway. We lack the realization that anger that we see expressed at the moment on the streets after curfew in the United States, the anger that is being expressed there is coming from a sense of violation. That anger is a passion for justice. But because we label these emotions as negative and then try and suppress them, we cannot suppress the negative emotions without suppressing our positive emotions at the same time. As we suppress our feelings of sorrow and grief, we're suppressing the emotion of love. Because sorrow and grief comes from what you love and what you've lost. As we suppress our feelings of fear and terror, we're suppressing our immense capacity for courage. And as we suppress our feelings of anger, so we're suppressing our awareness of the unfairness of things, the sense of violation that is being inflicted on others or on ourselves, and we suppress our feeling of the passion for justice. And as we suppress these positive emotions along with the negative ones, we come to live in emotional flatland. And living in emotional flatland is exhausting, and it's a slow slide into depression. So people, our emotions give us information that we need at this time. Information that is absolutely necessary for the future that we're trying to build. And that's why we need to take the time now, the time to build this, of empowerment, of empathy, and of service, as Svetlana has suggested. This is the kind of world that we want to live in. And we need to be the change that we want to see in the world. And how do we know if we have achieved the purpose for which we have come in this time? Hello, if you're still here, you haven't yet achieved the purpose for which you've come. So we've still got work to do, a life's work that is unfolding in front of us. So, dear people, we are approaching the last 10 minutes of this talk. We've covered a lot of ground here, a lot of ground about possibilities for the future. We are what is possible, of achieving who we really are. And that is not who we think we are. Who we think we are, or who we think other people are, because other people are labeling us too. Who we are labeling comes from a little voice in the head, a little voice that's making judgments, about others all the time. And that little voice is not who we are. It's something that we have created in this lifetime. That identity, that picture of who we think we are, is not me, is not you. And who really are you? Who are you in reality? I believe none of us have an idea yet of who we are, who we're really capable of being. Who we are really capable of being in possibility for the future. But how do we become that being? How do we become that being of whom we're really capable of being? I believe it's through engagement. It's through engagement with others. It's through engagement in the world. It's through engagement in communities. It's through engagement in our work. It's through engagement in our families and with our neighbours and our friends. These are the ways in which we achieve new awarenesses about who we really are. And hopefully, in this way, we can step beyond the narrow confines of the comfort zones that we've built for ourselves. We can step out into an excitement, enthusiasm that we didn't even know we were capable of feeling. And through that engagement, we can build the kind of future, the mission and the vision that works for all of us, through our intentions, through what we do, and through the plans we make, and in deep celebration and commemoration and recognition of exactly what we're doing and how we're doing it and what can be done better. This is the secret. This is the secret to building the world. And we are all in it together. And none of us yet knows all that is to be known about the way. Hopefully someday we'll hear a story of this time, perhaps told only at the time of our great-grandchildren, about the people who came to the world at this time and lived through these changes that made their future possible. That's why we're here. That's what we're doing. Good luck. I'm seeing that a lot of people here are thanking me for the talk that I'm giving here. I have something to say about that. The reason why some of the things that I'm saying here may resonate with you right now, it isn't me who's giving them to you. The reason why they're resonating inside you is because they are there already. It resonates because you recognize it. And you recognize it because you have been living this. You have been living this life already in coherence and coordination with the things that I've been saying. That's the reason why you can recognize what others are saying to you. If you didn't have it there already, you wouldn't recognize it. It wouldn't be there, so you couldn't see it. So I want you all to celebrate that in yourself. Empathy for others begins with empathy for yourself. Empathy for others is built around the forgiveness of others for what they've done. And forgiveness of others for what they've done comes out of forgiving yourself. And we need to build that kind of empathy if we're to have the kind of future that we need. So, we have 5 minutes before this live chat finishes. I would like to thank all of you who've tuned in. And I would like to ask those of you who have tuned in and perhaps have been moved by anything that I have said, please spread this to your friends and neighbours. Please spread this to others. Share this talk with them. Because through sharing comes true communication, and through true communication comes true community. And through true community comes the salvation of the world that we are seeking. So, there are now just 5 minutes to go. Yes, this is an interesting time, a very interesting time, in which we are confined to home, to build the kind of homes that we want, and to find ways of connecting with others, as I've connected through this program with you. So, build on this. Build on your home. Build the kind of home that is a song that can be sung. And build connection with others so that their voices join in the song and your voice joins in their song. And from this singing, we build the future. Thank you. I would like to finish this talk with 3 minutes of Pinakari, the kind of meditation that enables us not only to hear the sound of our own breath, but to feel the connection with the song of the earth. Thank you.